everybody, to another conversation session during the ABLE Annual Meeting 2021. This one is facilitated by Sonia Taylor from Portland State University today, and she's going to talk about rediscovery through ePortfolios. The session is being recorded, and we also have the live transcript running, so you're welcome to take a look at that as well. And the slides are shared in our portal document. Over to you, Sonia.
Awesome, thank you. So I just was having you post some songs in the chat as a way to set the tone, because we're gonna maybe take a trip through memory lane. And I have been having some conversation with former high school seniors who are now graduated from college. And I like to use music in the classroom where I can, because I think it helps, especially in this digital environment. So I did a Google search for advice to high school self, and I found over 7 billion responses. And then I Googled advice from high school self, and it was like 8 billion responses, but it was all advice to your high school self. It was not actually advice from. And so I wondered about like flipping the script, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in youth. And so I made a Padlet for us to imagine maybe advice. If your high school self met you, what would they want to say? And find anything here. In case you need it, that's the Padlet link. So we'll take some time. I have a list. I was going to create an able list, but I already have this graduation year songs list that I started, and I'm going to play it, and maybe for one song we'll see where we're at on the Padlet, and then we might need another song, but we'll start with that. Thank you for sharing your advice. Do you have any like surprises or discoveries when you think about that? Was it hard to come up with advice that your teenage self might give you? And also, do you think that you really would have said those things? This is the question I have, because I wonder if they're thinking long-term about that, because we all have experience. I put a little link to the playlist in the corner of the slideshow, and it has my original graduation playlist, some songs from my high school to college graduation, and then the songs that you shared today are added to the list. So if you want to play it for inspiration later, you're welcome to do so. So I decided I wanted to have conversations with my students, because I'm friends with a lot of them on social media, and I noticed that lots of them graduated the last 2 years, and which makes sense, because the first 2 cohorts of senior inquiry students I had were the students who graduated in 2016 and 2017. And so I thought, well, like, I want to know, like, what are they doing? What do they think about senior inquiry and how it helped them succeed? And also, what do they think of their ePortfolio? And so over the last few months, I've talked to 8 different students, 5 from the class of 2016, 2 from 2017, and 1 actually who just finished her first year of college at U of O. And she actually sent me her personal ePortfolio. And so we had a conversation. After our Recoder conversation, I gave her some feedback, which was super fun. And I think that what I'm noticing is that there's just different pathways to success, but all of them really found the process of senior inquiry to be a foundation and a site of transformative learning that helped them succeed in college. And 2 things that stood out for them in what helped them succeed were research and reflection. And of course, I wasn't surprised about the research, but it was interesting to me that they could highlight the reflection piece. And I think that that comes from the engagement with ePortfolios. So I made this kind of a video blog where I talk about kind of setting up what the conversation is going to be. And then this original interview I had was with Lorena and Diana. They actually got interviewed for PSU Magazine when they were taking senior inquiry in high school. And when they graduated, I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to check in with these women again, because I have this archive of them and their experience. And then we had this conversation, the three of us together, and it was really amazing. Some people here have heard it. I've shared it a little bit, but it really started me on a path of how many of my former students can I talk to about their experiences. And then the next student I talked with, Alexi, she just finished up at U of O and she's going into grad school. Oh, I should say, Lorena and Diana. Diana's finished her first year of grad school at Notre Dame, and Lorena is applying to grad school. Alexi, she just graduated at U of O and she just started her grad program like the next day after we talked. She was starting classes, and she really highlighted the reflection piece for me. And I believe all of these students that I interview are first generation college students. And so they talk a lot about what they discovered about themselves. And they also talked about when they looked at their ePortfolios, oh, I knew what I wanted to do. Like I actually did have a plan and I have accomplished it. Annie is still working on finishing her bachelor's degree. She's had a ton of challenges, but she has persisted and she has stayed connected, and she has this wealth of life experience. She's done study abroad. She's gone to different parts of the world. And we actually, speaking of, we talked a little bit earlier about zooming in from the car, and she and I did the interview. She was in her car. So it was like not the best quality of video recording. But in her portfolio, we found this movie that the class had made for talking about their time in senior inquiry and what it meant to them. And it was really cool to discover that piece. And I posted on my Facebook, and lots of other students have seen it and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And it was nice to have that memory. Nobody has topped that video. They did a kind of like Office-esque version of our class, and it was pretty awesome. Brianna was great. She, in her ePortfolio, talked about wanting to teach elementary school, and she is on her way. She just landed in Idaho to start teaching third grade in Teach America. And we talked about, she talked about doing Socratic seminars for third graders. And she talked about how ePortfolios are great for assessment. So like just this next generation of people who've experienced ePortfolio, I'm really excited to see what that brings. And she also talked about when she first went into the classroom for senior inquiry, she said, I didn't think that I was going to be able to do it. I didn't think I was college material. I thought, who am I here with all these smart people? And she reflected on that in her ePortfolio. And then when we talked, she said, oh my gosh, my heart, why did I think that? I was in school with all of those same kids all my life and I got A's. Like, why was I worried about that? But really speaking to the confidence that she has gained in pursuing her education. Christian is a great story. He graduated in 3 years and ended up getting a job, exactly what he wanted to do right out of college. And he talked about his continued use of folio thinking in another sphere where he's a banker. And he talked about making connections with numbers and the stories that numbers tell, which I just was like, this is great. I'm so happy that we're having this conversation to see how it can translate. And then Gardner was the video editor on that video that I was talking about from our other interview. And he now works at an outdoor school, and he finished his AA degree actually, and then got a job in production for different studios. And so he's kind of created his own hybrid career of being an outdoor school instructor and doing the techie movie stuff that he still loves. And I was like, oh, it's great to reconnect, and maybe you should come to class and do a workshop on video editing and help this next crop of students get back to the video excellence. And so that was a really interesting conversation. And then the last one is Poe, who is still in college, and this has both her personal and academic portfolios in here. So there's a lot to get through. I think our shortest conversation is maybe like 15 minutes. Some of them are quite long, but I thought like you could pick and choose. I did a reflection around them so you can kind of have an idea of what is going to be in the conversation and explore it further. And let's see here. That's it for my part. That's all I have to say. And I want to have a conversation with you. I put my contact information on the last slide. This is the first time I put Facebook as part of my digital footprint that I share professionally. It's really intentional. Like, I think this is a community where I really enjoy all of the people and would love and I see Facebook as sort of my digital living room. Like, I would love to have coffee with anyone who's my friend. So I know, like, if anyone friended me from Able, and please message me and say, I'm from the Able conference, remember? So I will add you as a friend, because I definitely, Facebook is just my blog. I mean, I give up. I started to try and do a blog in lots of different places, but Facebook is the thing that persisted for me. That's what works. And I know for other people, different things work. But that's where I do a lot of reflection and conversation. And I think there's some good conversations on there, as well as, photos of cats and funny stuff, because it's important to have balance. And I put, my different social media stuff on there that's public as well. So, and with that, are there any questions?
Well, others might have already heard you, but I'm new to your work. Tell us a bit about the course, the Senior Inquiry course?
Yeah, sure. So Senior Inquiry is a year-long seminar course. It's interdisciplinary, liberal arts based. We teach freshman inquiry at Portland State University. It's part of our 4-year interdisciplinary gen ed program. And Senior Inquiry is the first year of that, but embedded in a high school. And we have a college professor team teaching with 2 high school faculty, and they get the exact same credit as transcribed, the same as freshman inquiry. And it's 15 credits. And if they come to PSU, it knocks out the first year of their gen ed program so they can move on to other things. And if they go to other schools in Oregon, it transfers a specific credit. Writing 121, 4 credits of social science, 4 credits of arts and letters. So it's like gen ed credit. And then, I mean, when students go out of state, I have to kind of build articulation agreements organically. So I just built one with Northern Michigan University, which is a semester school. So they looked at the programming and awarded specific credit for it. Organically, yes. And so I'm really excited, because the more examples I have of that, the easier it is to advocate for students to get credit for what they've done in other places. Oh, I should say, we are in 6 schools in the Portland metro area, 4 different districts. We've had about a little over 600 students a year the last few years. And I just got permission to pilot a new direct credit option that's just a college professor online asynchronously. Anyone in Oregon could take it. But it's geared for high school seniors and specifically focused around building cultural capital and social capital for college. And it's asynchronous so that students from different regions can be in the same class. And I'm hoping some conversation and understanding and productive disagreement across the rural-urban divide is going to happen, because I think we need it. And storytelling is a big part of that. Sorry, Gail.
Oh, no, that's fine. So I love this project. I love this idea of having your students go back and revisit their portfolio from high school. And, they hadn't probably, I don't think, looked at it since, right? This was like, okay, let me go and see what I did, see what I said. One thing that shocks me, I couldn't get my computer to cooperate, so I wasn't able to put anything in the Padlet. But my advice to myself in high school would have been like, don't worry, nothing is going to wind up like you thought it was, but it's still going to be okay. And these students, they were like, yeah, I'm on track. And, things are, and granted, it hasn't been that long, but I find that really amazing that most of them are on track. And I wonder if that's part of, putting it in a portfolio and thinking about it and writing about it, even though they didn't look at it, it was still there and almost like this manifestation. But that's a long preamble to finally my question. And that is, now that they had an opportunity to go back to their portfolio, and I know that they can continue to work on it and use it, do you think they will? Do you think it's kind of motivated them to continue that idea of reflecting in practice and on practice?
Yeah, habits are hard to change. And so I think that often the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So I do think that I would have to nag them in most cases. But Poe, the last interview, she and I, no, we're going to have like annual meetings. She's going to send me her updated portfolio. And because I have a deeper understanding of the approach and what's possible and the scaffolding needed. And I teach a landing course at PSU. So I hold space for former senior inquiry students to take my sophomore class in the fall. And this year I have 16 students that were in my senior inquiry class have come in. The last 2 years I've had about 9. So it's up a little bit. And I do e-portfolio in my sophomore class too. So then they have 2 years of it, like forming the habit. And some of them are in a like totally voluntary project with me to do portfolio work in an ongoing, like, let's check in once a year or every 6 months and kind of add to and shape, like, what do you want to reflect on? What competencies do you want to build in? So I think that the potential for that is definitely there. And like some of the people I have conversation with, Gardner, he has a digital archive on a drive of all the videos he's ever done. And he might think about, oh, I want to showcase this and we're going to collaborate together doing other stuff. And he might say, hey, Sonia, like, I should do this. What do you think? So I think a little bit of that. But I think there's something magical in the rediscovery and also a missed opportunity for like building the habit. So I'm super excited to hear, like, when one of my district partners says we're looking at ePortfolio for K-12. I'm really excited about that because the habit of reflecting and thinking intentionally about building your identity, if we're doing it all the way through school, imagine, like, we could solve all the problems, I think. I'm a realistic optimistic. So I understand the possibility is slim, but the hope is real.
Isn't that kind of the whole idea of the lifelong portfolio, that you start very early on and then you continue throughout school, university, or higher tertiary education, and in your workplace as well? So that would be good to kind of reinvigorate with some of those ideas that you've been talking about, Sonia.
Yeah. And I think like we all realistically, we're going to end up with like 57, like what Candace said, like I have 57 portfolios or whatever. Like we're going to have that because we'll figure out, oh, this one, I liked that, but I like this, but now this is what works for me. And I sort of settled on that with my public portfolio. I did a lot of public facing portfolios until I landed on, I'm going to have like a snapshot and philosophy, and then I'm going to have a practical teaching and learning tab, because that's who I am and that's what I do and that's what works for me. And it's like always kind of messy and in progress on the second tab, and the front tab is much more polished. But for other people, different things are going to work, but it's really about building that archive of experiences and reflections and understanding, and then being able to organize them in different ways. Like I could build a portfolio on almost anything if you could give me like an hour, and I like, oh, okay, I can search through and find the stuff that I did that's related to that. Here's my portfolio focused on that thing because I have the materials. And I think, that's one benefit of technology keeping everything, is that you can keep having those bits that come up, and it's in the apps too. In TimeHop and in Facebook, you get the memories. They come up that you were doing this 8 years ago. Here's an opportunity to reflect. And it's funny because I'll say, oh, I guess this is the time of year when I travel, because all of my memories are traveling and that kind of stuff.
Is anybody else doing something similar with high school portfolios and then continuing on to higher education? Or maybe even having a research project? And if you don't, there's the Shark Tank at the end of the week where you can propose such a topic.
Well, a few years ago, there was a group at the University of Wolverhampton in England, and they were looking at e-portfolios as transitional nodes between different aspects of their academic and professional careers. And so they were starting in middle school and having the e-portfolio be the transition to high school and then to higher education. And so definitely, I think there's room for it to be researched more fully. And Sonia, the work you're doing plays right into that.
Yeah, that's funny, Kevin, that you bring that up, because actually Wolverhampton houses the platform that built the structures that she's using. And some of those early studies have informed the work that Sonia and I have done together. So that is amazing that you pulled that specific example out of the globe right there. So that's pretty awesome.
As if it had been planned.
That means we need to suggest the song Synchronicity by the Police.
There you go.
Yes, I can add that.
I was thinking about your selection process for this a little bit. You had a deep relationship. I had the privilege of seeing some of those interviews. Thank you for showing me those. But it makes me think that you had a deep relationship with the students who found value in the reflection and were willing to share those things with you. So, the outcome of your selection of students to follow up with, I think shows that you saw and they saw the value then. But I wonder what would it be like if you were interviewing folks who were like, portfolio? Did I do a portfolio? It's nice that you're connected with the folks, but it makes you think of a broader study, the control group, which would be the students I had that were building their portfolios where they literally didn't do it. But the engagement, that was years and years ago in the same program, right, that you're in now, 7, 8, 9 years ago. But the structure around reflection has become a part of your curriculum, and you can see that the value has exponentially increased by you stating it as an outcome. So that's amazing, huh?
Yeah. I also think that because it is so much a part of my class, and because relationship is so central to the way that we do the learning in my classes, there's probably like 2 or 3 students who wouldn't have this kind of conversation with me if I said, hey, can you like connect? And like it's really just a matter of like who's connected, who I have easy access to, because I go through my archive and I know I could ask any of the students on there to meet up with me, and they'd be excited to do so if I had their contact info. And part of that was because as the students in their reflections mention that our class, particularly the first year of senior inquiry, spoke a lot about how the class was like a family. And the connection between the peers was super strong. And it just, in talking with them, it really brought home to me that that's the loss of this year. It wasn't learning. We all learned a ton. And kids are super resilient. They're going to go back in and the barriers are going to be down, and they're going to totally catch up with whatever standards that are there. But the peer-to-peer connection, not just like the socializing and social emotional health, but like I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me in words I understand? Like, and they talk about the assignments at the table and they share, and it's a different kind of closeness around ideas. That's not just about like, this is my socialization peer group. It's like this really thought-provoking and not always agreeing with each other, but respecting each other and being able to have that space. And so like, that's the part that allows me to reach back out and get them to come in. And I think in the other classes, it gets more academic as they go. And they say a lot more, and they have it's like a different presence. And so like one of the projects I'm working on is I have this collection of workbooks that is based around these three concepts: explore, challenge, imagine. And I've done these workbooks for a number of years now, and I've done them in senior inquiry and in my sophomore level class. And so I'm almost at the point where I've done it enough that I could do like I have a secondary data set of just like the reflections that they gave. Like I could totally anonymize it and just talk about like what kinds of words are used, how they talk about developing their academic identity. That's something that I'm hoping to work on next year. And I think one student said to me just recently, she's like, I don't know, I might have to drop this class because there's so much stuff coming up. And my mental health is not the greatest. And I think actually the reflection in the ePortfolio is making that more apparent to me, even though I love it. And just the awareness around that was awesome to me. And I don't know, she didn't confirm. I was like, here's the options, let me work with you. And she hasn't confirmed yet. But after that, she turned some stuff in. So maybe she's going to continue, and she just needed to have a space to say that, and which was totally awesome. And I said, be at your own pace and let me know what you want to do. How do I support that? I mean, it was clear to me that she wants to learn, so that's not going to stop.
It's interesting too, because reflection doesn't just surface learning, right? It surfaces a lot of emotions. And working at Showcase Portfolio, the other end, literally. So while you're teaching, then I'm working at Showcase Portfolio at graduation, PSU, right? Where I've said for many years, it's so important to have student health and counseling involved at those triage points where the year is culminating and they're doing a lot of reflecting and emotional things are occurring and those sorts of things. But what you just said makes me want to ask you to talk a little bit about something else you did with your students. Do you like this part? One of the things you mentioned when you first started the presentation was the transformational nature. And I think University Studies, the program you work in, offers a lot of opportunities for that. But you have scaffolded two really important steps in the transformational learning process, which is that individual reflection and then peer discourse on those reflections around their social identities and these, the power structures. But you did that with some blogging too. So how did that filter into the portfolios, or was that just a part of your daily activities with the students, or how did that go? Because I've seen a few and they're kind of compelling.
So are you talking about the blog assignment around building cultural competency? Okay. And there's links to that assignment on my portfolio, because it was a really powerful experience for all of us. We did, there's like a survey, the IDI, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it or have taken it. It's Intercultural Developmental Index. And like you take it, it's sort of like the unconscious bias tests that have come out at Harvard. You take the test and then it tells you on the spectrum of like a continuum where you are developmentally with your cultural competency and ability to work across difference. And so we took it as a class, and this was an opportunity because one of the faculty in our team was trained in the assessment part and interview afterwards. Which is why I haven't done it in my classes again. So we had this great opportunity to do it, and students were only able to get their individual results if they would have an individual one-on-one meeting with the person who was trained to talk and debrief about that, because things could come up about like, this isn't me, and people could get angry about it. But we did a group one. So like, here's where we are as a group. And all of the faculty did it individual. Like we all got to know and have a session. We chose to do that. And several of the students chose to do that as well. And then they reflected on the results. And of course, the spectrum goes from like denial to adaptation. And in the middle is minimization, which is where most of us are because we're trying to get along with each other. But we minimize the differences because we're afraid of the conflict, I think is my take on it. But so then we had a blog centered around growing your ability to deal with that. And so like developing awareness and empathy of other cultures and other people's realities and life stories, and understanding basically positionality, which is kind of the evolution for me, is that now I have my students do a positionality statement, and then they use that as their theoretical framework in their research paper. So really just getting explicit about this is your lived experience and it's valid. And that doesn't mean that it's somebody else's valid lived experience and they have a valid lived experience that you might not recognize or understand or believe in, but it's true for them. And to start, that's like, I think the ground level of being able to find the common ground and work together productively.
One of the questions posed today was how to support underrepresented students when their cultural competency around describing their skills becomes evident. And I feel like that would have been a wonderful strategy to share with whoever that person was that said that was an issue, right? To validate the lived experiences, the whole life of the learner.
Yeah, and I think in my workbooks that do the Explorer Challenge, Imagine, there's supposed to be helpful to develop academic identity. And the first workbook has them talk about like a slide that represents them and then things that they wish people knew about them and sort of how they see themselves. And then there are aspects of their personal life that come into the series. And I have an interview, which I think you have a copy of that video because I did a little brief presentation in Pebble Pad, I think last summer with one of my students. And she said that it was she didn't realize that her personal experiences could be academic or valuable academically. And which was like, of course, but also like, ugh, like, why is that such that's a common response that I'm sure students have. And we can learn so much from each other. Like in my Families in Society class, the students always say that they really learned that there's a lot of similarities between families and there's a lot of differences. And they learn that from talking to each other and hearing each other's stories. And hearing each other's stories is a huge part of learning in the educational process. So I was like sad to hear that she didn't realize that before, but super excited to hear that she had realized that that her stories were valuable and her experiences were valuable.
Well, I think that's kind of a number one aha moment for students. And, my perspective and my bias around portfolios and folio thinking is it needs to be embedded in a conversation, right? And a student needs to put something out there and they need to have conversations about it, whether it's peer-to-peer or whether it's student to mentor or whomever. Those conversations open up ideas and windows all the time. And that's, what I see from my millions of conversations with students is I'm like, well, weren't you, president of your sorority, or weren't you, captain of your sports team? And they're like, yeah, but that was over there. You don't want to, that doesn't go in my portfolio. Of course, right? This is the whole you. This is the big picture. It's not just what happens in these four walls, and seeing the light bulbs like, whoa, okay. And then giving them permission, which is, terrible, but saying, yeah, please write about that. Tell us about that. I mean, it just, their eyes light up and, they could go on forever. So it's beautiful.
I think that often students struggle with the integration of like figuring out how school fits with their identity as a human. because sort of the side thing, and it's usually there's a lot of problematic experiences that happen there. And one of the things that I talk about with my students is the difference between education and learning and like school and learning, and like school should be where we learn, but that's not a lot of time, you know, what the main priority is for some of the people there. I mean, learning happens. We can't help it. We can't stop it. And I think that was a frustration for me this year when there was a lot of talk about learning loss. And I was like, there's so much learning. There is so much learning. I think the biggest learning loss is in the administrations of institutions because of this, you know, obsessive need to go back to whatever the normal, you know, whatever that version of normal, without understanding like this is what's happened and this is the opportunities that we have in this like moment of chaos. There's a lot of opportunity to restructure education that I don't think we've ever had this much opportunity to change education as far as I've learned. Any last questions or comments?
Well, I like Kevin's comment, can't stop learning. I'm going to be singing that now all the time.
Maybe I should put that on our playlist too.
We still have a little under 10 minutes left if anybody wants to ask some questions, in case you're wondering whether you can start on a big topic or whether it has to be a short question.
I don't want to jump in and fill the silence if somebody else has a question, but I was wondering, since you're doing this with high school seniors, but I gather also, you know, college first year students do the experience, the inquiry project course. Have you all noticed differences between, you know, high school seniors doing it, first year college students doing it at college?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we have, I guess, our retention and graduation rates for students who take senior inquiry and come into Portland State is 7% higher than students that come in as just normal freshmen, which is, I mean, that's a data point. And my supervisor, I wonder why that is. Well, I think it's because the students who come from senior inquiry know they can do it. And it's maybe a self-selection of success. But also we broaden the amount and the variety of students who come from taking the class. So a lot of students who didn't think they were going to go to a four-year school come to Portland State because we lower a lot of barriers for them and they develop a lot of confidence in the class. So, I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal stories and there are, you know, conventional data points to offer, but I mean, the stuff that I'm doing with my students that are now graduated from college and some more longitudinal conversations down the line, I think that's the information that's really going to help bring it back and do more of this. I think the University Studies program and Gen Ed, the way that we do it differently at PSU is like 26 years old now. So almost nobody at the university remembers what it was like to have distribution requirements, except maybe some of the tenured faculty in the science department that are still salty. I think that there's some revisioning and reimagining around our program right now. But I think that having the integrated experience and making the connections and the folio thinking process just increases the odds that the learning experience is transformative. And I don't know, a lot of people complain about this is different. I wish I could just take, you know, siloed classes and check the boxes off. But I don't know many people that say, hey, my distribution requirements Gen Ed component changed my life. Right? And like, I know that a lot of students who go through the university studies program do have that feeling and say that, and I'm one of them, but there are many.
Well, as we get close to the end here, even though we have a little bit of time, I'm going to post the link to the session evaluation form so that people can save it as a tab or window. And then after the session's over, you can make sure to fill that out. But we want to encourage everyone to give their feedback.
Thank you, Kevin, for doing that. I'm currently experiencing some problems with my connection, so I made you a host so that I can just come back in on a different computer.
That sounds like a plan. Well, other questions for Sonia? I'm curious as what's next. Now that you've done all this great work, how do you want to build on it or take it to the next level?
So I think like directly back into the classroom, I want to show my students the videos of the students talking about their experiences so that they can have the opportunity to make the most out of their portfolio experience. I do a lot of, mostly my projects and my research are things that I can turn around and use in the classroom. Like it's all about like making the experience better. And I had a big opportunity for that. Last year, my research project was interviewing faculty about the shift to remote teaching. And I got it with a colleague. We published an article in a special COVID issue of Online Learning Journal. And what I loved about that experience was that we went remote in the fall, and I felt like I had so much resource and a wealth of knowledge from all of the faculty who had participated and talked to me about their experience that I could really incorporate and, make it, even though it really sucked, as best as I could make it. So that practically, I want to turn around and do that immediately in the fall. And I think that just long-term, getting more intentional about the philosophy behind it and the folio thinking practice and developing that habit and how it can look different and be different depending on what you prefer, what your strengths are, what you like to do. Because I've faced a lot of like people are resistant to particular platforms or changing platforms. And we all need to develop some platform literacy because it's just videos and text and images, and they can be arranged in lots of different spaces. So we could think about like, why this platform for these things? And also we can do these things on a different platform. So like I do workbooks for undergraduate research. And I did an example in PebblePad, which is my preference, and I could tell everyone why. But I also made an example in Google Slides to say, look, you can do the same thing here. It looks different, but it's really the ideas behind it that are the focus. And I think I can be much more clear about that now than when I first started doing ePortfolio because of just the practice of doing it. Oh, and also that data analysis project with the assignment. That's definitely happening in the next year or so. I have a pandemic puppy and he's been scratching at the door. So sorry, I gave in. Carly, I'm super jealous of the books behind you, but is that like a screen, like a?
Yeah, it's fake. It's
okay. So you're not really sitting in that room full of books that.
Nope. This is stolen from some home and garden magazine for my pretend fantasy of what I would like to have in my little one-bedroom.
Yes, my dream is to have a room with the walls that are lined with books. But right now I live in rooms that have stacks and stacks of books. And I still have no time to read all of them, but there's some good ones out there. Thank you so much for your time and attention and comments and questions. And I appreciate this community a lot. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you so much. And